Welcome back, brothers and sisters. I am Braden. This guy over here is Tim, and this is Second Legacy. And thank you so much for stopping by. Now, you may have seen us both individually on our individual channels, Langley Outdoors Academy for me, Military Arms Channel for him, but we have come together in a collaborative channel called Second Legacy, and that is where you find yourself right now. This channel is dedicated to giving you more ammunition for conversations to bring more people to our side so that we can pass the blessing of the Second Amendment along to the next generation. And if you like this message, like this content, this format, we would love to invite you to help us grow the channel. Subscribe, like the video, and make sure you share it and turn that notification bell on, because we have got some rights to pass on to the next generation, and that's what we're about. So today is no different. In fact, we had some amazing things come down last night, and I'm going to throw it over to Tim, and we're going to start to introduce this because, guys, this fight is getting spicy, and we got some stuff to talk about.
Well, welcome to the show, everybody. And so today we want to talk about John Roberts, the Supreme Court, and of course our Second Amendment rights, but we're going to take a little bit of a detour here, and we want to cite CNN of all things. All right, so Mr. Producer, number one, CNN reports that John Roberts takes center stage in the battle over student loan forgiveness. But again, today's discussion isn't about student loan forgiveness. Nope. It's about what John Roberts is doing and the arguments that he's making that will benefit us in the 2A community and our continued fight for our Second Amendment rights. Mm-hmm. Now, with regards to the student loan forgiveness, this is all about spending, okay, and the authority of Congress. So to that point, from the article, number two, Mr. Producer, Chief Justice John Roberts pounded away on the price tag of the student loan forgiveness, about $500 billion for the Biden administration's student loan forgiveness program during oral arguments on Tuesday. But as he repeatedly cited the big cost, he reinforced a broader, more familiar point that could further undercut executive power and enhance the Supreme Court itself. It's a little bit misleading in that statement. So, Braden, what is this leading up to? This does dovetail into our Second Amendment rights and the battle we will face with braces in particular. Right? That's where we're going with this. Absolutely. When it goes to the courts, and it's going to the courts. The lawsuits have been filed. More may be on the way, but there's a good chance that it will go through the circuit courts. Either side, whoever wins or loses, is going to appeal, and it may very well wind up on the doorstep of the Supreme Court. So How does this all fit?
So I'm going to be honest. I'm amped about this one. And the reason that I'm amped is because what we always deal with in the Second Amendment space, in the gun control versus gun rights space, we're always arguing a point that's about another point. It's always about something unrelated to what they're actually doing. For example, if you want to ban magazines, well, let's talk about the reasons why you can't do that. Do you want to put forward red flag laws? Let's talk about due process. There's always something different that we're talking about, and this case in point is no different. The point that brought to the Supreme Court was all around the amount of student debt forgiveness that the executive bureaucracies and branch was allowed to just sign of a pen, make it happen. It's usurping power of Congress because this is spending related. This is utilizing bureaucracies through the executive branch to usurp control from Congress. Now, where does that sound extremely familiar? You've got ATF pistol brace rule. You have the ghost gun, or the frame and receiver thing. You've got all these different areas of which the bureaucracies and the executive branch has overstepped their bounds. For an example, we're about to hit West Virginia versus EPA. This is occurring in every single sector of the government where this conflict is being basically instituted by the executive branch because they can't get their stuff through Congress, so they're trying to force it. And that is why this is so crucial. In fact, Mr. Producer, if you could throw up number 3, then we'll hit number 4. The 68-year-old Roberts pressing an emerging, quote, major questions doctrine embraced by the right and generally forbidding agency actions on matters of vast economic and political significance without clear authority from Congress. But now when we jump over to number 4, this is how it ties in. Last June, in the power plant emissions decision, by the way, that's West Virginia versus EPA. It's an interesting way to frame that. Let's keep going. Which Roberts wrote, the court held that regulations raising major questions, such as those around the climate change crisis, should be permitted only if an agency can point to clear congressional authorization for its action. And Tim, I know your brain is screaming, that is the point. That is the moneymaker. Yes. What do you think?
That's absolutely the point. This is something we've been arguing all along. You have these bureaucracies like the ATF, EPA, name your alphabet agency, that are usurping the power and authority of Congress. Our republic is structured in such a way so that we have a voice in our government. we don't have a voice in bureaucracies. These are unelected officials that serve life sentences, if you will,
Yep.
put it mildly. And it's very hard to remove them from power. They're protected. And so you have agencies like the ATF that have people that are lifetime politicians, but unelected politicians that are serving a political agenda, carrying out the will of, in this case, the Biden administration. But they're doing it in defiance of the authority of Congress. Congress is supposed to control the purse strings. Congress is supposed to enact laws and legislation, and the agencies were created to resolve any minor ambiguities in a law that might pass. On its surface, it seems reasonable and legitimate. But the problem is these agencies have usurped more and more power to the point where the agencies, the APA, for example, and the ATF, for example, they're going above and beyond the authority that they have. And they're doing it in such a way where they're literally creating laws and calling them rules. But rules shouldn't carry prison sentences. In the case of the braces, if you get caught with a brace that was previously legal for a decade, but now through a rule change, not a law change, through a rule change now carries the penalty of the NFA, which is 10 years and $250,000 fine. Now you're talking about a pretty significant leap of authority that these agencies have taken from Congress. And what's being said here is that Roberts is saying, hey, no. If you want to do this, if you want to assign criminal penalties, if you want to do these drastic changes based on your theories of climate change, you have to go back to Congress and get this authorized. You can't just make this up as you go along, because these agencies are getting more and more brazen. And the Brace decision and ruling is a perfect example of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just nailed it. And if you're at home watching this or in the car on the whatever you're doing, the level of fight, the level of importance that this represents is massive. It is hard to overstate how important this is, because this is the kernel. This is the crux. You guys have all heard the idea of rip the problem out, or the plant out, or the weed out by its roots. This is the root. You can do all these different aspects and approach of what the problem is, but the problem is executive bureaucracies taking power that they do not have and reinterpreting common word definitions to give themselves an outcome that's desired by their president. This is incredibly important. And one of the things that we hit on consistently, whether we're talking about the ATF, when they're reinterpreting what a receiver is, when they're reinterpreting what a pistol brace is, all the way to the EPA, where they're reinterpreting what carbon dioxide is classified as, all of it is a means to an end to give themselves more power over you. And that's the important piece. Your rights are being infringed by non-elected bureaucrats who are changing definitions in order to change rules which carry the penalty of law, as Tim mentioned. That's why this is so important. Because when you look at the Supreme Court, Roberts is the chief of the Supreme Court. He's openly saying, you guys you're running amok. What are you doing? You've now got the executive branch just canceling debt. You have the executive branch saying that you're going to mandate certain things that, well, we're just going to leave that one alone. You've got the executive branch saying the EPA has to redefine carbon dioxide, and you've got the ATF going after pistol braces and all sorts of definitions. There's a consistent theme here. And if you take that problem out, that's a lot of the gun control side of the arguments, bread and butter. You take that out, you've got a lot more wins, and that's why we're hitting this so hard in a lot of episodes, to be honest.
Yeah, so the anti-gunners really have three main avenues of attack against our rights. First of all, they can do it legislatively. Secondly, they can do it through the courts. And thirdly, they can do it through these bureaucracies. And we're slowly taking away the ability to achieve these goals through the courts, because we're having conservative justices appointed, although we're going the other direction currently.
Right.
But we can also take this away from the bureaucracies, right? And this is but it's not a radical strategy. This is legit, and our argument is based in constitutional authority and the power of Congress. And so what's interesting is to see that the left-leaning justices are arguing against this. They're calling this a right-leaning new doctrine, right? But in actuality, this has been going on for decades, my entire life. And this goes back to Chevron deference. We've talked about it before here on the channel.
Absolutely.
Chevron deference means that these agencies have the authority to take a law written and passed by Congress and signed into law by the president, and then implement the law and deal with any ambiguities. And so the left is trying to say, and let's just throw up number 5, Mr. Producer, And this is in regards to the EPA decision. And this is Justice Kagan talking about it. So the court appoints itself, instead of Congress or the expert agency, the decision maker on climate policy. So what she's saying here is a misdirection. She's trying to say, well, the court is usurping the power of Congress, not just the power of the agencies, but the courts are the real danger here. But that's not what Roberts is saying, and that's not what the right justices are saying. The justices aren't usurping anybody's authority. They're kicking it back to Congress, the constitutional authority that is supposed to deal with these matters. It's taking the power away from the agencies that are appointing themselves judge, jury, and executioner, and basically creating policy on their own and implementing laws and punishments, and kicking it back over to Congress, saying, agencies, this isn't your domain. You've overextended yourselves here. Let's send it back to the constitutional authority, the Congress, and let them make the decision on where to spend money and where to, apply punishments and change policy, like with regards to the brace rule.
Correct. And that's the man, it's hard to explain how poignant that point was that you just made. Because what the left consistently does, they will consistently break a rule. They will break a law. They will go too far in an interpretation. And when they get curtailed, they go, oh, you're taking the job of Congress, which was the original thing that they did, which brought us to the conversation. So in this scenario, just to lay this out, and there's been a lot of instances of this recently in the Supreme Court, the left does something that's unconstitutional, or at least there's a question of unconstitutionality because of their action. Therefore, they get called into the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, you're violating the separation of powers. What are you doing? And the solution is, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. You're doing it. It doesn't make any sense on its face. You are literally being called into the Supreme Court to say, why are you violating your separation of powers? And your solution, when they tell them they're wrong, is, well, now you're empowering the court too much. Nothing in this decision, nothing in what Robert said, nothing what anyone has said says the courts will decide climate policy or any type of policy. Even if you go back to the Dobbs decision or the Bruin decision, anything from last year, all they've said was throw it back to Congress consistently. But they don't want it to go back to Congress because in the legislative process, they're stuck because they don't have support, which was the original problem of the executive bureaucracy action they took.
Yep, and that's precisely why we have a Congress, because these type of stalemates and the inaction of Congress is precisely what the process is supposed to look like, right? We're not supposed to wake up one day and make radical changes to policies or laws. We're supposed to have a debate. We're supposed to build support and go and argue our case. And if you can get a majority of people in the Congress and the Senate to go along with the argument that you're presenting, then through a process, you get a law passed. It's supposed to be a time-consuming process. It's not supposed to be a knee-jerk reaction to things going on in the world. This is to protect ourselves from those knee-jerk reactions and legislating ourselves into an authoritarian regime. And so when you have agencies doing just that have knee-jerk reactions, that wake up one day after 10 years of precedence, in the case of braces, and these things have been perfectly legal, given the blessing by the ATF, all this commerce has been set up, all these millions of dollars in accessories have been sold, all these millions of Americans have purchased them. Then 10 years later, the bureaucracy, on a knee-jerk reaction based upon direction given to it from the administration in the White House for political purposes, they go out of their box, and because they can't get what they want done through Congress, they decide to take their own action and implement this through the bureaucracies. And that is so wrong and so unconstitutional. And that's what Roberts and the right justices are trying to bring back into control, trying to get these agencies to give up this power and put that power back into the hands of Congress, the elected officials, that if you don't like their decisions, you can go to the polls in 2 to 4 years and remove that person from the equation, right, and replace them with somebody that shares your values and your visions in terms of how you view the republic and laws and all that good stuff. Right. So it's really, really interesting to see how the left continues to redirect the conversation in directions that my 10-year-old son could debunk. Kagan's comments were so out of left field, pun intended, that it just seems almost comical that that's the argument against the agencies usurping all this congressional authority. So, Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. There's a lot of good information in here. We will link to the CNN article so that you can share that and review it for yourself. We generally like to post all of our source material in that description down below. We also invite you guys, again, to subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to us. We really want to empower the Second Amendment community in such a way that they can have conversations with their friends, family, co-workers to bring people over to our side of the argument. We have the facts on our side. We have the Constitution on our side. All we have to do is make rational arguments and debunk those arguments being proposed by the left and those that would strip us of our liberties. With all that being said, thank you again for watching, and we'll talk to you guys in the next episode.